Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the 5th installment of GBTA's Tech Committee's Women in Tech series. I'm here with my good friend and associate, Francesca Dapiran, and we've got two special guests for us for this session. First is Amy Taylor from SAP Concur. Amy has been in the business travel industry since 1993, and during this time has held various leadership roles in customer-facing positions, including ops, account management, implementations, and even sales. In addition, she spent some time fulfilling the travel manager remit, so has seen the industry through many lenses. Now that she's at SAP Concur, she's the Senior Director of Product Strategy in EMEA. Amy provides insights into the unique characteristics of this market and helps guide the product vision and prioritization across SAP Concur's portfolio of solutions. In addition to her day job, as if that wasn't enough, Amy also co-founded Level UK in 2017 to help guide the business travel industry on its journey to gender balance, which we're going to talk about today. Also joining Amy is Claire Osborne. Claire is the Director of Customer Success at Travelport International. She has worked within the travel industry for more than 25 years, working across many disciplines. She started her career in various account management roles before progressing to head of agency sales at STA Travel. Claire then moved into the role of commercial and marketing manager at Resort Hapa before taking a change of direction and becoming a business expert at TUI, helping shape and define changes to their internal systems and consumer technology solutions. She joined Travelport over 10 years ago, having held a number of roles at Travelport, including Director of Product Support for Europe, Solutions Sales Director, and Head of Local Product and Technology. And she was recently appointed as Director of Customer Success. In 2017, Claire was elected to the board of AWT, which we'll learn a little bit more about here shortly, and was delighted to be successfully nominated to the position of chair at the AGM in 2019. So thank you so much for joining, and I'm going to hand it off to Francesca so we can have a great discussion on women in tech. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you so much, ladies, for being here today. I'm very, very excited to talk to you a little bit more. Before we get into some of the deeper conversation, I just want to do a few icebreaker questions posed to both of you. What is a piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
So, the piece of advice I would give to my younger self would be to believe more in myself, to have the confidence and the conviction of my opinions, I think. Very frequently, certainly in my early career, there'd be areas that I thought I could probably address or opinions that I held, but I wasn't confident enough to speak out because there were lots of other loud voices in the room. So I would say, now that I've found that confidence, I would encourage my younger self to find it sooner.
And yeah, very similar for me, really. I think that the four words I would have said to my younger self were, you are good enough. I spent a lot of time doubting that I perhaps wasn't good enough, and a bit of imposter syndrome, couldn't quite believe the opportunities I might have been getting. And in hindsight, I realised I got them because I worked hard and I deserved them. So yeah, you are good enough.
Yeah, very, very wise words. And to follow up with that, if you were not currently working in travel technology, what industry would you find yourself in?
Oh, that's a good one. So I love puzzles. I love piecing things together. And I think probably because of that, I would probably head towards the genealogy world.
Ooh, okay.
So quite different.
Yes.
Mine would be quite similar. So I work in travel tech, and I know without a doubt, if I wasn't in travel tech, I would be in travel. I tried to leave the travel industry a few years ago and go and work for the cargo airline FedEx, and I quickly came back because it's just where my passion is. I love traveling. I love everything about the industry. So I would have for sure probably ended up carrying on in some commercial role in travel.
Okay, so always sticking with the travel then.
I think so. I think I was kind of born to it somehow. So yeah, it's in my veins, deep in my blood and my organs. So I think even if I wanted to escape, I probably couldn't.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes the travel industry so unique, I think, is the people that work within it. I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Once you're in, you're probably not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And I know this one is an oldie but a goodie. And since we are women in travel technology, I do have to ask this. Who is your female role model?
So I thought long and hard about this one, and I have to say there are two people in particular. I would just also caveat this to say that I have male and female role models, and some people that have played very significant part in influencing my life. But I think probably the two that I learnt the most from were one of my first managers, a lady by the name of Fiona Cale, who really taught me the ropes in managing people and dealing with difficult conversations. So I think her for that reason. And the other person is my mum. So she has held so many different jobs over the years. She finds something that she's passionate about. If she doesn't have the skills, she goes and learns it and then goes into business. She's done a phenomenal job in that regard.
And yeah, similar here really. A lot of, unfortunately, my managers have been male, but have had a massive influence on my life. So when I looked at who really was a female role model for me, and with the Olympics being one of the things on everyone's mind at the moment, I actually decided to plump for Dame Kelly Holmes, who, for those of you that don't know, is a double Olympic gold medal winner from Athens 2004. And I was lucky enough to be in the stadium to see her win her second gold medal, which was a phenomenally emotional experience, knowing the journey that she'd been on. So she'd failed many times to even medal, even to make major championships. And she just kept going about her business, tweaking, learning from her failures, learning from the things that hadn't gone well for her and finally got to where she needed to be. And that for me was really empowering to know that if you fail, it's not always a bad thing to experience. It's a good thing to build on. And she epitomises that. She also does loads of work for the LGBT community, and also lots of work with encouraging young children from underprivileged backgrounds into athletics, which is also very worthy.
I think that's fantastic. And truthfully, I never actually heard that story before. And I think the thing to take away from that is you probably are going to fail at some point. We all are. So it's just moving forward and getting up after that. Very great. Okay. So I've already had some fantastic conversations with both of you. And there's a lot of stuff that we definitely want to highlight today. But before we dive into that specifically, I'd love to, start off with a very brief overview in your own words of your journeys navigating the travel technology sector. So as we know, why we have these conversations, it is typically not a female-dominated world, right? So what were your experiences that led to where you are today?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it. I really didn't ever see myself in technology. I was told as a young girl not to bother doing computer science for GCSE because I clearly didn't have aptitude towards technology. Bearing in mind at this point, technology was probably an electric typewriter. It's quite a long time ago. And an opportunity actually arose through a friend of mine who said that TUI were looking for people to go and work in their new media department, and they wanted people with industry knowledge, not with technology knowledge, but someone who could learn and pick things up. And I just thought it sounded interesting. I wanted something different. I'd just become a new mum. I was ready for something for me. And so I gave it a go, and I actually found I really enjoyed it. And really enjoyed the creative side of the tech business, which I don't think comes through strongly enough when people are considering careers. And the rest is history. What I learned at TUI, I was then able to bring forward when I came into my role at Travelport, and have enjoyed 10 years here. Yeah, so nearly 14 years under my belt in travel tech.
So for me, similarly, I've been in the travel industry for a long time, as Mike mentioned at the beginning, and my transition was something of a gradual one. So I had spent a lot of time in the TMC space. Early on, I'd been one of the super users when I was a consultant, helping do train the trainer and those sorts of things. So I always had an interest in technology. I'm a very logical thinker. Again, similarly, didn't do great at maths, but thinking about the logical process of things, and it's quite odd that I'm quite a data geek now. I love kind of looking at data and seeing how that helps to guide our decisions. But I went from the TMC side. There was a technology startup called Silverrail Technologies that was looking to target the business travel market. And the people that were at that organization didn't necessarily have the business travel skills. So I went in and added that to their technology environment, learned a huge amount about rail. And then I think the stars aligned, because the person who was at Concur managing the rail suppliers, so I came in on the supply side, the person at Concur managing the rail suppliers left, recommended me, because we had grown to know one another through the industry, as a couple of other people had recommended me as well. So I actually came to Concur on the supplier services side, rather than a particular technology role, obviously working for a technology company still. And then we had to do a review of a number of our supplier connections. And whilst I was doing that review, I essentially created a case, assessed the level of development that was required, and this got the attention of somebody who was in the product management organization at the time, and he approached me, and we had a mutual conversation about what this role was like, and then I moved into this space within Concur. So it was really about gradually building my skills throughout my career and navigating that journey.
Right. It's interesting to hear, and I think this might be for a lot of people in the space, is that you don't necessarily go out with the intention to be in travel technology. You sort of just find yourself there once you're exposed to it and realize how much you actually are good at it and love it.
Yeah,
absolutely. So, you both are here today because you've become pillars in the women in travel technology sector, and you're both very well-renowned role models. So in your career paths, at some point you both made a decision to send the elevator back down, if you will. And you've used that influence to help those who, are just starting out on their journeys when it comes to this space, whether it's to various groups or initiatives. So first to Claire, Mike mentioned at the beginning that you're a member of the Association of Women Travel Executives, or the AWTE. This actually happens to be one of the oldest associations, you told me, being founded back in the 1950s. So a few questions on that. What made you first want to get involved in this organization, and what have you seen so far? And then furthermore, given when the association was founded in the 50s, we live in quite a different world from that time. How is the AWTE staying relevant and modern?
Yeah, so the reason I got involved really was through a friend who suggested I go along to an event. I'd always had a perception that a lot of these types of organisations were quite cliquey, and actually I was welcomed with open arms and really encouraged to share experiences and have an input and a say on how things were done and how things could be improved. And I think that's the sign of any good organisation, is you continue to evolve. So as you said, we were formed in the 1950s and things were very different back then. And the reason we were formed was because of gentlemen's clubs. And our founder couldn't go and make business connections because she wasn't allowed in because she was female. So she decided to create her own club. We now realise that that basis for membership, executive level only, is prohibitive, and that women only has become almost as elitist as a men only environment. So we've taken steps recently to open up our membership to men. Anyone who wants to support the careers of women in the travel industry, that it shouldn't be exclusive in that way. And we want to bring on new talent and pass on the things that we know, rather than just share our experiences within our own level. You know, we want to make sure that we're encouraging people through, and making sure that the next generation of women don't have to face the uphill struggles that perhaps we had to. You know, starting work in the late 80s, early 90s wasn't easy for women to be noticed, wasn't easy for women to be taken seriously, and you had to behave and perhaps act a certain way that we shouldn't have to now. So yeah, that's kind of why we want to evolve and continue to do so as an organisation.
Exactly. So it's not necessarily always just women supporting women, but everyone can be very inclusive now, which is a fantastic kind of move forward. I love that. And then Amy, similar, you went as far as to actually co-found Level UK, which Mike had mentioned. And this supports the industry's journey to gender balance by allowing important dialogue and a safe space for colleagues to educate, connect, and volunteer. So can you give a little insight into what you saw that you felt the need for an organization such as this, and how has it had an influence?
Sure. So it was actually shortly after my eldest daughter was born that I connected with Caroline Strachan and Sam Candy to found Level. And the impetus of that was partly due to my own experience of returning to work after maternity leave, but also the experience of other women that I knew who had children around the same time, and how the majority of them had faced challenges and discrimination because of leaving and then re-entering the workforce as a mother. But I must say that as I have continued on this journey with Level, I've been approached by men and women who have talked about discrimination within the industry because of their gender. Men who have been passed over for promotion because of a female quota that existed within an organisation, and similarly women struggling to progress within their organisations. So I think this is an area of gender balance that can benefit everybody. There's so many different things, and I'm sure we'll come on to some of them later, areas where everybody can benefit from this.
Yes, and in our conversations, one of the things I most loved was that you used the word balance as opposed to imbalance. Because by saying balance, it's showing it's not only just one side suffering, it's both can actually benefit. So digging into that a little bit, you often mention, both of you, this concept to reframe the conversation in order to achieve this. So can you both share a bit on what this means?
So I think we need to reframe the conversation from an HR problem to a core business opportunity. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, very often gender balance gets bundled in as a diversity issue. When we think about the graduates around the world, the majority of those are women. Women drive 70 to 80% of consumer purchasing decisions in the US. So women are not a minority. The other issue with having gender balance in with diversity initiatives is it often detracts from other really important diversity initiatives around race, around sexual orientation, and there's a whole host of work that companies are doing in this area. But particularly in global companies, it can be really challenging to be able to measure that. And so very often companies will fall back to gender as a measurement to be able to point to their broader diversity and inclusion goals. So there's a couple of reasons there. Now, in terms of a core business opportunity, there are so many studies that talk about the benefits to business when you have more gender balanced leadership teams or more gender balanced boards. So Peterson Institute is just one of many examples that says companies with more than 30% female representation in C-suite see an uplift of 15% in profitability by comparison to their peers. And there's many others as well that can go alongside that.
Yeah, it's. I think for me, we only find true equality when we have balance, and that's why I like that word so much. Equality for me is about a level playing field for everybody. Obviously, because I'm part of AWTA, I want to make sure women are part of that conversation, but not to the detriment of men. And we need men to help us, because at the moment, most of the people in positions of influence are men. Equally, I think what we need to do is get women into those positions so that other women can aspire and can see that that's possible. So when Amy and I were talking about the people who inspired us, we're talking about people who set the bar, set the goals, set a belief that it's possible. So I think that for me is really important, that we have people we can look at who not just represent us, but show us the way and show us that it's possible.
Yeah, and I think these are all incredible points, and it's a different way to look at the issue, because it's not an issue, it's an opportunity, as Amy, you love to say. So I really want to round out today's conversation with some tangible takeaways that our listeners can implement in order to actually achieve this in your own workplaces. So what are some tactics that you both would recommend companies to look at to approach this gender balance question?
So I think for me, there's three key areas. In addition, as we just said, about making sure this is led by the in-group, so led by the majority. Very often, as we just said, that tends to be men in leadership positions. But in terms of what people can do to make a difference, we always say in travel, don't we, you can't manage what you can't measure. And this is no different. I would suggest the first thing that anybody in a management position does is looks at the people within their organisation from entry level through as high as they can, possibly up to C-suite. And you'll probably find in many organisations, people, males and females, are entering the workforce at approximately the same rate. But usually after as early as the first promotion, you start to see that gap appearing until at the highest levels, that gap is very wide. So I'd say the first thing is to measure and see how you're tracking against that. The second thing I would say is, given that we know that this gap starts appearing after the first promotion in most organisations, is have a look at your early talent programs. Have a look at the average age of graduation and the average age of parenthood for men and women within your companies. Many companies will find that the average age of women becoming mothers is usually right in the middle of the time where they're looking for early talent, whereas men becoming fathers, you tend to find that's often a little bit later in most geographies, and so very often men are picked up in more higher numbers in those early talent programs. And the final thing, the third thing I would say, is connected to that. We often see in many societies, the burden of childcare is often seen as a woman's responsibility. If companies start looking at policies of equal parental leave, that burden of responsibility will no longer fall to women. I've had conversations with people where you have two men or two women raising a child, and the conversations about who goes back to work and who stays at home with the baby are very different to when you have male and female couples. So often it's down to the policies that exist within the employers that determine who stays home, who goes back to work. And Aviva were one of the early adopters of equal parental leave. They've recently just published their latest findings. So it's about 3 years into the policy now, and they're saying that women and men are taking leave at equal rates within their organisations. 99% of fathers are taking parental leave, with 84% taking at least 6 months. So we can then start to see that burden of childcare, or indeed any care, is then split between genders, and we should start to see an evolution of that no longer impacting people's career paths.
Yeah, and to add to that, we've seen a lot through COVID, where I'm very lucky. I work for an organisation that has a flexible working policy, and it applies to everyone. What we're aware of now is that not many men were taking advantage of that. What we've seen with COVID is men have realised how great it is to be able to take advantage of a flexible working policy, and to be able to become more involved in their children's lives. And we see that a lot of our male colleagues are now wanting to work from home a couple of days a week in order to provide care to their children. And I think, as Amy says, that only really gives women an equal playing field when that burden of responsibility is also shared, and we're not seen as the provider of care in detriment to our work. And I think attitudes are starting to change. If one good thing comes from COVID, I think a lot of companies have seen what we have seen, which is great. And I think also, we need to think about how we recruit as well, and what pool of talent you want to recruit from. I know I have been the lucky victim, which is perhaps the wrong word, of recommendation and referral, because people hire people they know and people they like. But that doesn't always work for the benefit of women, and especially where people in the positions recruiting are men. They'll often hire people they know and that they like. So I think we need to think a little bit more about recruitment policy and make sure we're being much more open and opening that talent pool when we bring people into a business.
That's a really good point, actually, in relation to that talent pool and making those hiring decisions. I know there was a study done some time ago now. It was actually looking at, I believe it was either police force or fire service in the US, and they did a study. They had 2 identical CVs. One had a female name, one had a male name, and the preference of the people recruiting in this study were to hire the man. But when they had to publicly say in front of a group of peers what the attributes were they were looking for from that hire, if they did that before they then saw the CVs, it was much more balanced. So they almost had to sort of hold themselves to account. They've said what they're looking for in the hiring process. They've made their decision, and then they're justifying it against that initial decision criteria. I think that was quite interesting to see those results.
Yeah, I think the other thing about flexible working as well is it opens up that talent pool in terms of geography as well, which again, helps with people who have families, helps with people who perhaps moved out of the cities, looking for a better quality of life. It's not ruling them out of job opportunities anymore. And I think that in turn kind of helps women move on in the business because they're no longer tied to office location. And for a business, it opens up the talent pool of people you can attract, because you're not saying, I want people who are within a 10-mile radius of my office. I'm opening up the opportunity to the best person available to do that role. So yeah, it's exciting to see how new agile policies are coming out and influencing the people that are coming into businesses.
Yes, and to both those points, I think this is something we're just realizing now is these unexpected results of what happened since COVID. So the idea that men are now more present than ever before when it comes to child rearing, because a lot of companies are going to a work from home situation. So they can't help but now be more involved. So it's going to be interesting to see those implications and how that balances with the different policies at the level of work. And then, of course, as you say, the resource pool is now almost limitless, right? So what does that mean? It's a benefit to men as well as to women.
Yeah.
That's a geographic location. So that's, I don't think we expected it, but now that we're seeing it, it's going to be, where is this going to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been approached by a number of men since setting up Level that have talked about the fact that they want to be far more present fathers, but that the policies within the companies that they work for are not set up in a way to support them to do that. And as you guys are saying, I think now that flexible working is no longer being targeted primarily at women, it's being targeted at the entire organisation. That allows a lot of people who want to be able to take advantage of that to do so.
And I think men, just as much as women, are now asking for those policies.
Yeah, which is great.
So
yeah,
we'll see what happens with that. I think that's a fantastic thing to kind of keep your pulse on. But with that, I don't have any additional questions. Thank you guys so much for this thought-provoking conversation. I think we left our listeners with quite a few things to sort of ponder over. I'll turn it over to Mike quickly just to say closing remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate those insights, Amy and Claire. I mean, this was great, and looking forward to sharing all the resources as well from Level, Aviva, AWTE, everything out with our audience. I thought it was great. The thing that hits home for me most, and we've talked about this before, is you don't have to do it because it's the right thing to do. You should do it because it's the smart thing to do. 30% women in the C-suite, 15% more profits. Any questions? I mean, just go with that. You know, I'm a money guy, so I'm coin operated. That really hits home. So really appreciate those insights for everybody in the audience. Oh, one other thing too is I've loved, Claire, that when you talked about, hey, I've tried to get out of travel a few times, but you keep winding back. It reminds you of The Godfather, where just when I thought I was out, travel keeps pulling me back in. I think that's the story for a lot of us, and we've been here a long time. But really, really, thank you so much. This was great. To the audience, if you have any ideas for women in tech, please let us know. A lot of stuff going on with GBTA right now. Obviously, Denise being elected to president is great. And just so happens she works for a tech company called PayPal. So right within this theme as well. We've got convention coming up in November. We've got a new tech safari coming up. And of course, expect another Women in Tech session a month from now. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great week, and look forward to seeing you all very soon.